At that time, Kisaragi was already surrounded by his enemies. However, he easily managed to defeat the goblins one by one, but due to the Goblin King's ability, the goblins kept appearing. According to Kisaragi, he could no longer defeat them all at once because of Loki's berserk effect. Additionally, the goblins kept coming in masses due to the unique summoning and disguise skills of the Goblin King. There was no other option because the Goblin King was in a berserk state, causing all the goblins he summoned to have the same effect. If Kisaragi didn't manage to defeat the Goblin King, he would be trapped in an unwinnable battle. In this case, Kisaragi decided to lock the Goblin King's ability so he couldn't cause any more trouble. Suddenly, Kisaragi's talent for wordplay activated. He immediately ordered the Goblin King not to use his abilities, but surprisingly, the monster was able to escape Kisaragi's power. Consequently, the Goblin King immediately attacked Kisaragi. Fortunately, Kisaragi managed to fend off the attack, but the Goblin King's strength kept Kisaragi pushed back. At that moment, he wondered what was happening. Loki then told him he had a good idea, and if it weren't for the berserk status given to the Goblin King, it would have worked. Loki said it was unfortunate, and then Kisaragi realized that the Goblin King's abilities were not locked. Instead, the Goblin King continued to summon his minions. On the other hand, Loki explained to Kisaragi that the enemy he would face was a god. Therefore, he had to find a way to turn the situation around in such a scenario. Kisaragi quickly understood that the one who cursed Mayu was the leader of a mythical rank dungeon, like Loki. If he fought an enemy like that, he would never be able to save his sister. Meanwhile, Loki asked Kisaragi if he could still fight. Kisaragi immediately replied that of course he could. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Suddenly, Kisaragi moved in to attack the Goblin King, but the monster just stared at him. Without warning, the Goblin King growled and prepared to use his summoning ability. "It seems you've used it, lower summoning," said Kisaragi. After that, he told the Goblin King that he would take his ability. Instantly, Kisaragi's mimic ability activated and successfully copied the target's ability. He immediately activated the lower summoning ability and the monsters were all surprised. Meanwhile, Kisaragi wondered what would happen next. However, he had not finished speaking when he was suddenly surprised by a cute little laugh. On the other hand, Loki couldn't help but laugh. Kisaragi asked if it was true, but it was a small Fenrir he fought in the mythical rank dungeon. Although small, he could still see the resemblance. Suddenly, a group of goblins approached to attack them. Instantly, the small Fenrir also rushed toward them and quickly used his ability to destroy the monsters. The result was a massive explosion in the area. Kisaragi was astonished by what the small Fenrir had done. Then, Kisaragi asked the small Fenrir if he wanted to fight by his side. The small Fenrir immediately responded with a bark, so Kisaragi told him he would leave the small goblins to him. At that moment, Kisaragi felt more confident because he had a partner in fighting the monsters. At that moment, the one-on-one battle began. Suddenly, the Goblin King swung his weapon. Fortunately, Kisaragi managed to deflect it. Then, Kisaragi also swung his powerful sword, aiming directly at the Goblin King's leg. By chance, Kisaragi successfully injured the Goblin King's leg, causing him to fall to the ground. While the Goblin King was still down, he suddenly became terrified seeing his followers being slaughtered by the small Fenrir. Because of this, Kisaragi immediately took the opportunity to end the Goblin King's life. Unfortunately, the attack did not kill the Goblin King. Kisaragi then ordered the small Fenrir to finish him off. The small Fenrir quickly followed Kisaragi's command. Additionally, Kisaragi also jumped and stabbed the Goblin King's head directly to ensure his death. Thankfully, they finally managed to defeat the Goblin King. As for Loki, he cleverly used summoning spells against the Goblin King. However, this didn't mean Kisaragi could boast just because he had defeated a beginner-ranked dungeon boss. Kisaragi said he realized that, but even though it was just a beginner rank, he managed to get through it alone. Therefore, he would continue to grow stronger until he could defeat the god who cursed his sister. On the other hand, Loki asked Kisaragi how he would call the little one by name. "Let me think, Lufin." "I will call him Lufin," as Kisaragi said. However, he thought it was just a derivative of Fenrir's name. After that, Kisaragi stated that he thought it was time to wrap things up. He then invited them to exchange the magic stones and buy something nice for his sister, Mayu. Moments later, the woman in front couldn't believe that Kisaragi managed to clear a dungeon alone. Therefore, he told her that he had the magic stones as proof of completion. He also said that he wanted to exchange them for money immediately. The woman agreed with him, so she asked him to wait a moment while she exchanged them. However, the woman still wondered how Kisaragi could enter the dungeon alone at that level. Meanwhile, Kisaragi completed his transaction and it was time to go home, but he was suddenly distracted after seeing a group of people across the way. On the other hand, Tadu asked the woman in front of him named Oshi-chan if she wanted to work with him. However, according to Kisaragi, this girl was said to be the first to awaken. Even so, Hashigane apologized to Tadu because she wasn't interested in him, and his people were shocked by Hashigane's words. Like Kisaragi, it was very difficult. Without warning, Hashigane suddenly called Kisaragi, so Tadu was surprised, but Kisaragi turned as if he didn't know he was being called. However, Hashigane immediately walked towards him. At that moment, Kisaragi said to Hashigane that he didn't expect to meet her in that place, but Hashigane said that she found him. Moreover, she said that she came there to look for him, which surprised Kisaragi. Hashigane then revealed that she received a call from a receptionist she knew. She told her that there was an awakened one who entered the dungeon alone at that level. Additionally, Hashigane was sure she knew who she was talking about. Meanwhile, Hashigane Rin was in the same class as Kisaragi and Tadu and was the top student at Tenjutsu Academy, the school for the awakened. Coupled with their favorable physique, the media was very interested in her, but to Kisaragi, she was just a girl who had nothing to do with him. Back to the scene behind Kisaragi's head, the receptionist might have told Hashigane after the wordplay effect wore off. Besides that, he guessed that it was a mistake to forcefully enter the dungeon in such a way. However, Kisaragi remained silent, and Hashigane said that if it was difficult to explain, he could show his ID card instead unless there was something he couldn't show her. Kisaragi was very shocked at that moment. What did she mean by that look? You're not really hiding something, are you? As Hashigane said. On the other hand, Loki told Kisaragi that he let Hashigane tease him too easily, and he said he wasn't tempted. However, he forgot that only he could hear Loki, and Hashigane was confused by what he said. After that, Hashigane remained confused by what he said. Kisaragi said it was nothing. He then asked if he was right and only needed to show his ID card. She replied that there was no problem. Suddenly, Tadu interrupted them and said, "Yo, it's been a long time, Kisaragi." Kisaragi was very shocked at that moment. Meanwhile, according to Tadu, he heard that Kisaragi survived, and he said it was nice to see him again. According to Hayato, they were glad to see him safe. Besides that, Yashimura stated that he expected nothing less from one of their party members. Kisaragi remained silent while clenching his teeth. Conversely, Tadu told Hashigane that he would ask again, then asked if she didn't want to join them. Together with him, they would form the strongest group. However, he hadn't even finished speaking when Hashigane suddenly ignored him, turned around, and directly asked Kisaragi if he could show his ID card. At that moment, Kakeru looked embarrassed. In an instant, Kisaragi showed his ID card while Hashigane stared at it. According to her, she had suspected it, but it was indeed him, and he managed to get out alone. For Hashigane, that was quite impressive. On the other hand, these people were shocked to learn that Kisaragi had managed to get out of a dungeon. Nevertheless, according to Hashigane, Kisaragi had leveled up a lot. She thought it was natural for him to defeat the boss. However, Kisaragi was grateful because he had updated the information on his fake ID card, but Loki said he thought he should thank him. Meanwhile, Hashigane, who cleared low-level dungeons, didn't know that Kisaragi had that much hidden talent, but in Kisaragi's mind, all of this was thanks to Loki. Suddenly, Kakeru suddenly said that Kisaragi was lying. Besides him, there was no chance that this person managed to get out of the dungeon alone. Furthermore, Kakeru said it was impossible for a loser with trash abilities like Kisaragi, so he bet that he had cheated in some way. Additionally, Kakeru said he would stay quiet if Kisaragi was honest. Anyway, Hashigane asked Kakeru if he was serious. She also said that she knew it was impossible to fake a fake ID card. Meanwhile, Hashigane asked Kisaragi if it was true that he had been free since he took care of the dungeon alone. Then she said that if he wanted, she asked if he could form a group with her. Besides that, they could go to a dungeon together someday. Kisaragi was surprised by the beautiful woman's words. Additionally, Kakeru couldn't believe what he saw. He even asked Hashigane if she was crazy. He also asked why she chose Kisaragi. Instead of him, she then said not to be deceived because, in her opinion, Kisaragi didn't have the ability to get out of the dungeon alone. "Listen, I won't blame you. Join me, Chigan. We can easily conquer mid-level dungeons if you do," said Kakeru, but he hadn't even finished speaking when Hashigane interrupted and asked if he was done talking. She then stated that Kisaragi had cleared the dungeon alone, and that was an undeniable truth. Furthermore, she couldn't say that about Kakeru, who was always having fun with his friends. She also mentioned that she never liked people like Kakeru, so Kakeru felt very embarrassed at that moment. However, one last thing Hashigane said was that it wasn't that she didn't know all the things Kakeru had done. As a result, Kakeru became angry at Kisaragi. "You didn't report me to anyone, did you?" Kakeru said angrily. Kisaragi didn't know what to do. He could make an excuse or avoid the situation, but it was very painful. Without warning, Kakeru suddenly approached to hit Kisaragi. However, he was on a different level, so Kisaragi easily avoided Kakeru's punch. But unexpectedly, Kakeru suddenly used his power against Kisaragi. Kisaragi then told him to calm down, but Kakeru was really angry and immediately attacked him using his power. However, surprisingly, Hashigane easily stopped Kakeru's attack. Both men were stunned at that moment. After that, Hashigane asked Kakeru if he knew what he was doing. Additionally, it was forbidden to use skills outside the dungeon. Nevertheless, Kakeru said it was Kisaragi's fault, not his. He also said that Kisaragi was lying like a thief. Hashigane was shocked. Despite that, Tadu still managed to say that with his head held high. Without warning, Hashigane suddenly grabbed Kisaragi's hand and took him away. However, Kisaragi didn't understand anything and asked where they were going. On the other hand, Tadu said that he wanted to tear off Kisaragi's mask. Additionally, he said that Hashigane was his. A few hours later, Kisaragi and Hashigane arrived at a pavilion in the beginner-level dungeon. The pavilion village was a beginner-level dungeon with a recommended level. Kisaragi followed Hashigane as she asked, but he didn't know exactly what Hashigane expected at that moment. Kisaragi asked if she really agreed to fight them alone. Hashigane immediately replied that there was no problem. She then told Kisaragi to watch her example first. Instantly, the pavilion suddenly approached to attack Hashigane, but in a flash, she managed to defeat the monsters. Kisaragi was very surprised by what he saw. Meanwhile, Loki suddenly noticed Hashigane's sword. Kisaragi asked if he knew anything about it. Loki immediately answered affirmatively. After that, a new pavilion suddenly approached to attack Kisaragi, so Hashigane said it was now Kisaragi's turn. She asked him to show what he was capable of. Instantly, Kisaragi used his powerful sword to defeat the monster, but the pavilion turned out to be stronger than expected. It even managed to withstand Kisaragi's attack and counterattack, forcing Kisaragi to retreat. However, Hashigane told him to stay alert because she thought the pavilion was an intelligent creature, unlike goblins. Additionally, there were two ways to defeat an enemy using a shield: breaking the shield with force or using strategy to sneak through the shield. With Hashigane's guidance, Kisaragi managed to defeat the pavilion. In her mind, Hashigane thought that Kisaragi was better than she had expected. Maybe he really would invite him. "Good job, Kisaragi-kun," said Hashigane. Kisaragi immediately thanked her. After that, Hashigane said that since he had done well, she would let him handle a bigger enemy. However, Kisaragi did not understand what she meant. Hashigane explained that it was a test before meeting the boss, a mini-boss. A few moments later, Kisaragi and Hashigane were already facing the general pavilion. Hashigane said that they would start by eliminating its followers, and Kisaragi immediately agreed with her. They successfully took down the followers of the general pavilion. However, they were both surprised by a sudden attack from the general pavilion. A new group of followers suddenly appeared. According to Kisaragi, it seemed pointless to eliminate the followers at that moment. Hashigane remarked that Kisaragi was quick. Then she asked what Kisaragi would do in that situation. Kisaragi immediately said that they would eliminate the followers in one strike, then focus on the main threat. Hashigane smiled and said that was correct. They then began to execute that plan. While fighting, Kisaragi said that he knew this was not the best time to ask, but he wondered if Hashigane's guild would agree if he raided the dungeon with her. Hashigane quickly responded that it was not a problem. She also intended to leave that guild. Kisaragi was surprised to hear that. However, Hashigane told him to focus on finishing the fight first. Suddenly, Kisaragi appeared in front of the general pavilion and managed to wound its stomach. After that, Kisaragi called out to Hashigane and she said she would take care of it. However, a group of pavilion followers suddenly appeared. Hashigane could not launch her attack, so they both decided to retreat. As a result, Hashigane was angry and said, "Just when we were so close, as if facing Kakeru alone wasn't frustrating enough." Besides that, Hashigane wondered what Kakeru's business was. She also wondered if Kakeru wanted to join her guild like Jack US. If she had to keep working with Kakeru, she would rather do it alone. Instead, Kisaragi asked if she was really going to leave her guild. He couldn't believe she would leave Bloodshine, which was the biggest guild, just like that. However, Hashigane said she was serious, and Kisaragi was shocked by what she said. According to her, there were advantages, but it was far more trouble than it was worth. Just thinking about it was enough to make her angry. Furthermore, Hashigane said that she would use her people to relieve her stress. Moreover, her skill was an area of effect attack. She became slightly weaker against a single target. But in the heat of the moment, Hashigane suddenly used her skill and said, "Listen to me, stars," and rained down. As a result, fire spread to the place. TL Turnanog is a mythical kingdom in Irish folklore known as the Land of Youth or the Land of the Young. It represents another earthly paradise where its inhabitants never age and is famous for the legend of In and Neum. However, according to Kisaragi, although it was sometimes not as powerful, it was still incredible. "Aw, I feel refreshed. Now it's just the final boss," said Hashigane. However, she told Kisaragi to rest for a moment before that. At that time, Hashigane asked Kisaragi if he had ever heard of the great hero. Kisaragi asked if he wasn't the first adventurer in Japan to clear a dungeon with a heroic rank. Additionally, Kisaragi thought that the person's name was, but he didn't finish his sentence when Hashigane interrupted him and said, "Mikanag Dejiro." However, according to Hashigane, that was his old name. After Mika and Agadajiro's marriage, he became Hashigane. In short, he was her grandfather. Besides, this sword was a gift from her grandfather, and that was not all. Her grandfather always told all kinds of stories about his dangerous journeys with his friends to explore unknown worlds unhindered by anyone or anything. Agreed with Hashigane, she also wanted to embark on such an adventure. That's why she planned to establish her own guild soon. Without warning, Hashigane suddenly asked Kisaragi to lend her his strength when the time came. So, according to Kisaragi, if she agreed to do that, he would be happy to help. However, before he could finish speaking, Hashigane said that was enough talking, as she felt they had rested long enough. She invited him to go to the boss room immediately. A few hours later, they finally reached the boss room. However, Kisaragi told her to wait because he thought someone was there. "Yo, you really took your time," said Kakeru. He had been waiting for Hashigane and Kisaragi, whom he considered useless. However, Hashigane asked Kakeru what he was doing there, but Kakeru also asked if it wasn't clear they were there to help their irreplaceable friends. Anyway, according to Kisaragi, it didn't mean anything coming from Kakeru. Besides Tadu, he came to make sure his friends didn't do anything reckless. He also explained that his father had even provided them with new equipment at his request. Hashigane then asked if he would challenge the boss or not. She also said that the right to challenge belonged to the one who arrived first, although she hated that she had to do it. According to her, the right to challenge the leader was given to the first to arrive. This was an unwritten rule among adventurers. "Of course, I will," said Tadu, and he said he would prove that he was serious and aiming for the top. Moreover, Hashigane would see his true glory in action. On the other hand, Tadu told his friends that the brainless fool just saw them as idiots. Hashigane replied that nothing could be done. She then told Kisaragi to just watch and see what they had. Kisaragi immediately agreed because he thought he could challenge the leader next time. On the contrary, Loki observed them, but he was angry at Tadu for daring to mock them. At that moment, we could see the colony leader, the Stone King, who had a higher level and the same abilities as the Goblin King. He summoned a follower and also had a strong ability called Lightning Soul. Without waiting any longer, the battle between Tadu's group and the monsters began. However, according to Kisaragi, although he hated to admit it, Tadu's group was indeed strong and they could undoubtedly defeat the Stone King. "Do you like what you see, Hashigane? This is my power," said Tadu. But suddenly, Loki used his power and commanded the Stone King to be filled with madness and become a tyrant who must bring destruction to the world. Kisaragi was very surprised at this stage. Suddenly, the Stone King reached a level with a berserk status. Tadu wondered what was happening. The Stone King suddenly approached to attack Tadu, but unfortunately, he failed to dodge or block the Stone King's attack, so he was struck and bounced to the other side. Hashigane also didn't understand what had just happened. However, Kisaragi asked Loki what this all meant. Loki replied that it was obvious, besides, it was their punishment for getting in his way. Back in the battle, Tadu was powerless at this stage, and when the Stone King was about to end his life, Hashigane suddenly appeared and managed to block the Stone King's sword. However, according to her, this was ridiculous power. On the other hand, Loki asked Kisaragi if he was sure he could remain silent. He also said that Hashigane would be in danger at this rate. Kisaragi then told Loki that he was terrible. With a sudden surge, Kisaragi kicked the Stone King's face. After that, he told Hashigane to take Tadu and the others away from there. He also said he would hold him off. However, Tadu angrily told him to stop packing his things because he believed there was no way someone like him could beat him. But Kisaragi ignored him. Hashigane agreed with him and said she would leave it to him but also asked him not to overdo it. Meanwhile, Kisaragi mumbled his wish. Loki downplayed such a trick. After that, he suddenly called Luffy. Tadu was surprised and asked what it was. However, Hashigane fell in love with Luffy because he was so cute. "Now, let's do it," said Kisaragi. Then he ordered Luffy to take care of the kobold. Luffy immediately obeyed. While Luffy took care of the kobold, Kisaragi also immediately attacked the Stone King, but he was very strong. Kisaragi was bounced back, but he was determined to defeat the Stone King. Fortunately, he managed to injure the Stone King's body this time, but it was too shallow. Suddenly, the Stone King went berserk and unleashed his strongest attack. A great force caused lightning around his body, but Kisaragi wondered if he could mimic the Thundering Blade's ability. Suddenly, the system showed that the lightning ability had been successfully copied. Nevertheless, the Thunder Blade ability can wrap the user's weapon in pulsating lightning. This increases the power and penetration speed of the attack. Additionally, it can temporarily disrupt the target's movement. However, according to Kisaragi, this would definitely be troublesome to deal with. In an instant, Kisaragi suddenly called Luffy. Luffy immediately used his strong attack against the Pave King. Fortunately, he managed to hit him, but surprisingly, the Pave King was so strong that even Luffy's attack could not affect him. According to Kisaragi, he started feeling old. After that, he suddenly raised his sword and activated the Thunder Blade ability. Since this ability has an additional effect besides buffing his weapon, it can utilize lightning power to trigger an area attack. Additionally, it can also confuse any target hit in an instant. Kisaragi immediately attacked the Kobold King using his newly acquired ability. By chance, he managed to pierce the Pave King's heart and said that this was the end of the Pave King, who could only scream. Meanwhile, Hashigane was shocked by what she saw. However, Kisaragi said that it was over. "Good job, Kisaragi," said Hashigane, but she wondered who Kisaragi really was now. Loki asked Kisaragi if he really had to go to school. According to Loki, entering the dungeon would be a much better use of time. However, according to Kisaragi, he had to go to school to explore the dungeon. Additionally, there was a lot of information about dungeons at his school. Perhaps he could find clues about the person who might have cursed his sister. However, according to Loki, entering the dungeon was the best way to become stronger. He just told Kisaragi to do what he thought was right. He also said that it seemed the academy had something interesting in store. Meanwhile, Kisaragi asked if Loki would go. Loki replied that he would enjoy the show. At Tenjutsu Academy in the D room, Kisaragi suddenly entered the room. His classmates were shocked to see him because most of them thought Kisaragi was dead. However, the man on the left asked his friend how long Sir Ratit would continue to try to be an adventurer. In Kisaragi's mind, it seemed he was considered dead. But according to him, without a doubt, it was Kakarus who killed him without warning. Hashigane suddenly greeted him and thanked him for the previous day. In an instant, Kisaragi greeted her back and said that he should be the one thanking her for such valuable training. On the other hand, Hashigane asked how they would handle the intermediate level dungeon called Above of the Dead for the next dungeon. In Hashigane's mind, she still didn't know the limits of Kisaraga's power. She would try to uncover Kisaraga's secrets. However, according to Kisaragi, Hashigane definitely suspected him. He thought that he shouldn't be too flashy by using his abilities right in front of Hashigane spontaneously. Suddenly, the man in the middle asked why Hashigane was being so friendly with this loser. According to the right-hand guard, Hashigane was crazy for thinking about entering the dungeon with Kisaragi. However, Hashigane ignored him and then asked Kisaragi if he was free that day. If so, they could leave right after school without warning. Kakarius suddenly entered the room and quickly told Kisaragi that he was very upset. Hashigane told Kakarius that it was his sentence and also mentioned that Kakarius had the nerve to speak to them. However, Kisaragi hoped this wasn't a new problem, but surprisingly, Kakarius suddenly ordered Kisaragi to fight him. Additionally, Kakarius declared that he would expose Kisaraga's lies in front of everyone. Kisaragi was confused, while Loki just smiled at that moment. Anyway, Kakarius asked Kisaragi if he had ever cleaned the dungeon alone. He then asked him not to say that he would run away. It wasn't, as Kisaragi said, but before he could finish speaking, Loki suddenly told him to accept Kakarius's challenge. However, like Kisaragi, he didn't want to draw more attention than he already had. Besides, it was a big problem. Loki replied that it was to relieve his boredom and then said that Kisaragi should tell Kakarius to bring his friends. According to Loki, especially since Kakarius always bothered them when they were in the last dungeon, it was time to show who the real leader was. In Kisaraga's mind, it would be very annoying if something like that happened again. Maybe Loki was right, it was better to settle this matter now. Finally, Kisaragi told Kakarius that he would fight him. He also said that Kakarius could bring 2 of his friends and Kisaragi would face them all. Additionally, Kisaragi said he didn't want to hear any excuses when Kakarius lost later. Upon hearing that, Kakarius was angry because he thought Kisaragi was incompetent to speak in such a high tone. On the other hand, according to Loki, there was no fun in fighting. So, he asked Kisaragi how he could make a bet in this case. Kisaragi said that if he won, Kakarius would have to let Hashigane leave the guild and ensure JDMO approved his new guild registration as the director of JDMO. Kisaragi asked if it was true that Kakarius's father had the authority to do that. That was more than just Hashigane's dream. Hashigane was very surprised at that moment. However, as Kakarius gritted his teeth, he called Kisaragi an arrogant little leaf. Then he said he would defeat and kill him. Moments later, on the Tenjutsu Academy training field, Kisaragi said that whoever fell or surrendered first would lose. He then asked if they agreed. Kakarius immediately replied that it was fine because Kisaragi would lose anyway. Without warning, Kakarius suddenly launched his first attack using powerful fire. However, Kisaragi easily dodged it. But surprisingly, Yashimura suddenly appeared and approached to attack Kisaragi. Fortunately, Kisaragi quickly managed to avoid it, but Yashimura told him to stop dodging. On the other hand, Hayato was ready to attack Kisaragi using his powerful abilities. Luckily, Kisaragi managed to block it, but suddenly Kakarius approached again to attack Kisaragi and said he would burn him. After that, he said he would burn him using his storm fire technique. Hoshigane was very surprised because she was worried about Kisaragi. Meanwhile, according to Kakarius, a failure remained a failure, or rather, Kakarius bet that Kisaragi would regret it in the afterlife. However, unexpectedly, Kisaragi appeared as if nothing had happened. He also asked who said he was dead. After that, Kisaragi activated and immediately succeeded in mimicking Hercule's power and lightning abilities. On the other hand, according to Loki, it was very ridiculous because Tadu thought his weak fire could defeat Kisaragi. However, Kisaragi asked if Loki was right when he said he would die if he wasn't at a higher level. But Loki just told him not to lose at that moment. Kisaragi then said he didn't need to be told again. Then, Kisaragi suddenly attacked them and said he would win. However, Yoshimura wanted to follow Kisaragi, but to his surprise, Kisaragi managed to stop him easily, then immediately activated his Herculean power. Everyone was shocked at that moment. After that, Kisaragi managed to touch Yoshimura's stomach and delivered a powerful kick that sent Yoshimura flying. Tadu was trembling at that moment. However, Kisaragi said to him, "Let's end this now, Tadu."